Hi, this is the Democratic Alliance Labour Report, Sunday the 9th of May 2021. There's some interesting things that have taken place in this last week, and I appreciate you tuning in to listen to this short podcast. I really appreciate it. And once again, I'll ask you, if you're happy with it, to distribute it, put it on your Facebook, WhatsApp, send it to friends, colleagues, associates. I appreciate that. What I want to do now is I'd like to have a look and spend a few minutes looking at the Department of Employment and Labour's annual performance plans and review. It's actually really strange reading these annual performance plans and reviews, and I'll tell you why. Because it seems ostensibly that the department want to pretend it's business as usual. They want to pretend that we haven't got the worst unemployment in the world. They want to pretend that we haven't got the worst productivity in the world. They want to pretend that there aren't 11 million people walking the streets of South Africa who want to be employed and can't find employment. This pretend is unbelievable. And I just want to read from what Plato says. He says, "We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy is that when men are afraid of the light." That's Plato. In other words, Plato's saying, come forward, have a look at what's going on. Let's shine a light on the problem and let's see if we can find a solution. But no, the Department of Employment and Labour are not keen on finding solutions. It's actually Plato himself who said something else. Those who are smart, too smart, to engage in politics are being punished by those governed by those that are dumber. In other words, what he's saying is you've got to start taking interest in what's going on around you, because the politicians are never going to help you. They're going to be dumber. So if you feel that you're too smart to think about politics and you feel that you don't need to get involved in anything, you're going to be governed by those that are dumber. So to get back to it, and I will take you through some of the assessments which seem really weird. And to introduce myself again, it's Michael Bagram, the Democratic Alliance Labour spokesperson, and it's Sunday the 9th of May 21. All the government departments, various departments, assess the annual performance and put together strategic plans. They outline their hopes and wishes for the forthcoming year, and then they set targets for themselves. It's interesting because they set the target themselves and then they measure what they've done themselves. The only thing they're prepared to allow is the portfolio committees to ask them a few questions. That's all they're prepared to do. And it's actually very interesting because even the targets they set themselves and judge themselves, sometimes they fail it. And it sounds like Alice in Wonderland, but there you have it. Now let me tell you what's happened. They feel that they have fared really well. Now if you look back on 2020, the pandemic year, have a look at it. Think about it. Think about the disaster of the UIF, where there are still thousands and thousands of people who still haven't received their emergency funding, the TERS funding. And you can't go into their offices, they've closed it. Someone's uncle's friend's cousin got COVID-19, therefore they've closed the whole office and no one can go in. You have to go online. When you try to go online, you very seldom get in. The portals are closed, they are down. It is an unbelievable shambles, and yet they say they've fared really well. The Director General seems to think that all is hunky-dory. They've done really well. They've tested themselves, they've marked themselves, and they've done really well. And of course, the hardships and the system's failure don't exist. Now I must tell you, let's have a look first at the Compensation Fund. Now we know the Compensation Fund has been a failure for at least 2 decades. People have been trying to claim their medical costs, outstanding salary, anything for injury on duty, and yet no, they haven't had any success at all. They're trying to amend some of the legislation to make it even more difficult. We spoke about that last week. I think at the end of the day, the Compensation Fund needs to be completely ditched and redone. Needs to be handed out possibly to the private sector. They've spent millions and millions of rands on systems, on the SAP system. They've now got a new thing called the CompEasy system. There's nothing easy about it at all. And yet they're saying, when they mark themselves, they've done really well. Let me give you an anecdotal story which you can think about, and it's something that's made me really think. About 2 years ago, a fellow from Port Elizabeth had an industrial accident. He lost an eye in the industrial accident at work, claimed the compensation fund, filled in all the forms, no problem, attached all the medical reports, all the invoices, everything was done properly. It was 21 years ago. Well, he wasn't paid, he was messed around, they lost his papers, they couldn't find his name, they couldn't find that he was registered, all sorts of weird things. Eventually he got hold of me about 3 years ago, and I started writing to the Director General and even to the Minister. I didn't get a response. I then advised him to maybe go and appeal, an internal appeal in the department, and he was granted that appeal in the department. This is about 3 years ago, and he was given a date to go and represent himself in front of an appeal committee. And I said I'll go up there and help him at this appeal committee, wearing my cap as an attorney, as a labour lawyer, someone who should know more or less how the systems work. So off I went to Port Elizabeth to go and represent him at this hearing. Of course he couldn't afford to pay anyone, but I was now interested as to how an injury then that had taken place 18 years earlier could still be part of a claim. And the man, unfortunately, now couldn't get any medical help because he hadn't paid any of his doctors in the hospitals and the medication and all that sort of thing. I flew up there, I went in, and there was a very pleasant, genial committee. They listened to our story, they listened to the history, they looked at all the paperwork, and they agreed that he was entitled to all his medical costs. They agreed. We then produced that in writing, signed it off, shook hands. I left Port Elizabeth very satisfied that I'd done the gentleman a service at last after 18 years of the injury and the injured eye. In fact, his good eye was starting to fail as well. Well, of course, it's now 3 years later, and I have been speaking to him. He still hasn't been paid. The Port Elizabeth office don't know what he's talking about when he comes in and shows them the ruling of the committee. They keep saying, well, we're going to look into this, we'll get back to you in 30 days. Well, they've been telling him that now for 3 years. Again, that's the compensation fund for you. That's the fund that has to look after the workers of South Africa who are injured. The very vulnerable workers that have been injured relying on the compensation fund. They can't sue the employer because the compensation fund indemnifies the employer. Where do they go? They don't have money to go to see attorneys and lawyers and go to courts and that sort of thing. The compensation fund is there for the employees of South Africa and to no avail. We'll take the UIF. We've been speaking about that for months now and how it's failed. Let me give you another anecdotal story. A lady comes to me, this is about 6 months ago. She tells me that she hasn't been paid her TERS. She's been told to stay at home. The employer said during the COVID-19 crisis, they can't keep her there and they're going to apply for UIF for her. Well, she waits, and then she asks me to write to the Commissioner. The Commissioner tells me at the time that no, they hadn't applied for TERS. But the problem is, if the employer applies for TERS, you can then at least argue with the department. But if the employer doesn't apply, you can't, individuals can't apply for it. And so I said, well, you've got to do something here. Here she's caught betwixt and between. She can't claim from the UIF, but she can't claim anywhere else. So she has to claim from the UIF, and the UIF aren't prepared to force the employer to claim for her. So I said, but then what does she do at this point? No, they didn't know. Now there are thousands of people like this whose employers, for some reason either nasty or useless or just being damn foolish, don't apply for their employees. There are others who just never registered people for UIF. The department doesn't have enough inspectors, so you can't go around and inspect. So these people are left high and dry. I've just had another discussion with a lady who said no, they're going to suspend her during the pandemic, and they're not going to retrench her because they can't afford a severance payment. They're just going to suspend her on nothing, and let's wait. Well, of course, the UIF has come to an end. The TERS claimants have come to an end. And what does she do? She sits at home with nothing. And she's still employed, no salary, can't claim the UIF. Where does she turn? Nowhere. And this is the problem with the system. The UIF likewise is broken. So thank you for listening to me once again. The Democratic Alliance Labour Report. It's Sunday the 9th of May 2021. I really appreciate it. Thank you.